right now, y'all. How's it going? This is not a drill. As of today, April 14th, David Griffin is no longer in charge of basketball operations for the New Orleans Pelicans. And what does this mean for the Pelicans? What does this mean for the league? What does this mean for Willie Green especially? And what does this mean for Zion, who for the past 6 years, the same 6 seasons that Zion has been with the Pelicans the entire time, it's been David Griffin running the show, but no longer. Is this really going to change anything, or could this be monumental? Well, I wouldn't be surprised in either case, really, because it's the Pelicans. But regardless, there are some massive decisions for the franchise to make this offseason, and it is extremely important, of course, that they get someone in there soon. Not that they should rush the decision, although it does seem like they are leaning in the direction of Joe Dumars now. I'm glad I waited a little while to record because that definitely changes things. Joe Dumars is a very Pelicans kind of choice, to say the least. Definitely gives me similar vibes to like Stan Van Gundy. And I remember back when Stan Van Gundy was announced as the coach in 2020, nobody was really especially excited about that. But even still, Stan was not so removed from, say, the greatness of the Orlando Magic team. It's been even longer since Joe Dumars was in charge of, the Pistons when they were good. I guess it's been a long time. And I looked, and it looks like Joe Dumars, he worked with the Kings back about 3 or 4 seasons ago, but that was the last time. And I know he's been working very closely with the league itself recently. And does that mean he has any sort of like kind of insider? I don't know. But lots of people are already deriding this trade as just a whole bunch of cronyism, because they think, well, Mickey Loomis, supposedly friends with Joe Dumars. Some people say, I wouldn't know. But I mean, what is more Louisiana than a little bit of cronyism? But yeah, myself personally, I'm not gonna lie, I do feel the sentiment now, definitely. And I was never somebody who was enthusiastically going after David Griffin, because I don't think he's done a terrible job in many respects. The results have not been good, but it has been an undeniable amount of misfortune. And, well, we've just wrapped this horrible, awful Pelicans season up. So I figured it was time to do a bit of a season recap anyway, an audit of, well, it's pretty clear where most things went wrong, but what to make of this? Where can we go from here? And the timing of wanting to do that, now David Griffin is out, we can reflect on both this past season as David Griffin's biggest failure, I think we can call it, and then also just evaluate his entire tenure with the team. So the timing of this is rather apt and interesting. I met David Griffin myself for the first time recently. I was at the Charlotte Hornets game, which as a matter of fact was the last game that the Pelicans won this season. And I changed seats last minute because my mom ended up coming with us in last minute. I bought these last minute tickets, pretty nice, and like 7th row or something. And none other, what do you know, David Griffin. I'll probably edit the picture in right now. He was sitting just a few seats down from me. And of course, there are a million things I wanted to ask him, but hardly seemed appropriate. We chit-chatted a little bit, though. But now he's gone. And I'm not going to lie, I mean, not so surprising. I think we were all expecting some kind of move to happen soon. I mean, like, if they didn't fire Willie Green, it's like, after a season as bad as this, you expect a franchise to have not necessarily always a scapegoat, but typically the way sports teams work these days, somebody just gets fired after this. I mean, like, the Pistons' terrible, awful record season last season it definitely felt anomalous. And myself personally, I don't think they necessarily needed the clean house the way they did, although now it definitely looks like it was a great decision to do so, because now the Pistons look so much better. But that's a move you make to just reassure the fan base that we're moving on, that it's a new game. And it certainly is now because David Griffin being around so long, you kind of sort of, I myself like that. I know sort of what his operating mentality is and the general attitude he's going to take towards things. And I think I had an idea basically of like how this off season was going to play out. Most likely, if he was in, I mean, there were some things outside of his control, the lottery, things could definitely still get interesting. But I saw the safe, let's run it back, David Griffin approach, and that seemed very likely. And of course, there'd be some change in that scenario. Um, it's interesting. I feel like Willie is probably just going to stay. Everything's kind of pointing towards that. I think especially if Joe Dumars comes in, because I don't know, but of all the GMs that we could pick, I feel like Joe Dumars is the one who would be least likely to want to fire Willie Green, because I feel like they have a similar old school approach. They valuing defense and they have things to connect over. I mean, literally, Willie Green was a Detroit kid. He went to Detroit Mercy, and I mean, heck, he probably grew up kind of idolizing a guy like Joe Dumars. So I think they'll probably get along pretty well and this is the direction of the Pelicans is, Gail Benson, she has her people she likes, her crowd. And I in some ways I kind of respect it because there's like so many teams where it's like you get these private equity firms in and you're just going after like the quote unquote sharpest, best guys around. And the culture is, their corporate culture and it doesn't feel connected to the city. And like, it's kind of nice to have that. But the other thing is what's also good for culture in a team is winning. Winning some games would really help the team culture because I love how Gail Benson has said, look, as long as I own the team, I'm going to make sure it stays in New Orleans and we're going to make sure everybody involved with the team really respects the local culture and all that. That's all great. But, thinking, oh, let's go for Joe Dumars because he played at Lake Charles. He's from, where is he from again? Natchitoches. And not to insinuate that that's the whole thought process here, but still, you like, it definitely feels like they're not scraping as far as they could. And I'm not saying like you necessarily need to go out and poach someone from OKC's staff or the Spurs staff or the Celtics staff. But if you do something like that, it definitely goes a long way to just kind of reassure the fan base of like, hey, we're trying to bring in, and look, Joe Dumars does have a resume, but 20 odd years ago, he won Executive of the Year. A lot of guys in his position, they're kind of already moving on, looking to retirement. And not to say that it can't work, but it's like, we've seen it here before with Alvin Gentry, Stan Van Gundy. At a certain point, it just seems like, and we're talking about coaches there, but just like a coach can kind of lose the locker room at a certain point, it's like, I don't know how well a guy like Joe Dumars could play with a guy like Sam Presti. I mean, to be fair, not many people can play with a guy like Sam Presti. Certainly David Griffin was no Sam Presti. But with David Griffin, I felt very comfortable. He understood how a guy like Sam Presti works. And I think David Griffin was a smart guy who understood a lot of the league, but I think there were just certain flaws to his approach. And the main flaw is just kind of rolling the dice again. And I get it. It's what I wanted so many times too. I mean, I didn't want to move on from Ingram. I liked Ingram, even though there were questions about his fit next to Zion. And yeah, I did still kind of want to keep running it back and look where they got us when we, were just forced to make a move or lose him for nothing. So yeah, you get yourself in spots like that when you keep trying the same things over and over again. And I don't know, I think there were definitely certain times where you could say that Griff didn't wait too long. Like I think back to like the Lonzo situation where, okay, that was a absolutely baffling trade to me when it happened, but in retrospect, like how things played out afterwards, like it really feels like we dodged a bullet. Like, okay, Garrett Temple, Tomas Satoransky, who might have put up the worst performance I've ever seen in a Pelicans jersey. And I know we've had some really great candidates for that this past season, but like I encourage you, if I don't know if you can find any clips anywhere even, but trust me, Tomas Satoransky was heinous. Regardless, terrible return on the trade, but then when Lonzo has that horrific injury and is out for like 2.5 years, it's like, wow, thank God that wasn't our dead salary cap, So every now and then, like, I mean, that's an example of like Griff didn't try too long to hold it together, and maybe he didn't have much of a choice. And that's the thing, is that I don't know if it's David Griffin's fault, but it has been annoying. It's in the short few seasons since we got all these nice assets, it seems like we keep finding ourselves in little jams, and we need to use an asset to kind of jimmy our way out of it. For instance, like attaching second rounders to move Devontae Graham after that didn't pan out. And Devontae Graham was always meant to be a stopgap. I think people hold that against David Griffin too much. Devontae Graham, we were never banking on him being our point guard long term, I think. But yeah, it has been annoying where, like, if I had to say David Griffin, the one thing that aggravated me the most about David Griffin, I really wish he would have packaged up a whole bunch of our picks and maybe some of our own even, which, I mean, since we've been continually bad, it's been nice that we've had our picks all these years, but maybe it wouldn't have been so bad if we had cashed in some of our picks. I mean, we had so many picks from the Lakers, and they're pretty much all gone now. And we got picks from Milwaukee, and we still have picks from Milwaukee, which can still come in handy. But I'm just thinking, a couple seasons ago, if there was something available where we could have sent out 3-4 picks, and I know it seems foolish to give out that many assets, but if we could have gotten another like true all-star that could have been a really good fit alongside Zion. And I mean, of course, Zion's health wasn't great. Probably wouldn't have been great regardless. So still, not saying that team would have been guaranteed success, but you could have maybe avoided some of the heartbreak of just having to give away those assets anyway, season after season, these little deals to get yourself out of little jams, and I know a lot of the picks we sent out were just second rounders, but like, guys, we don't have like a second rounder. I was looking at least on the site I was looking at, it doesn't look like we have like an active second rounder except for like one in the next like 3 or 4 seasons, which is not the end of the world, but you can still get a good guy with a second rounder. Herb Jones was a second rounder. So yeah, that can be annoying. And I think some of our assets were used well at the time. Like, I still think the CJ McCollum trade was definitely worth it, especially at the time. And I know there are a lot of Pelicans fans who don't love CJ McCollum. I get it. He can be inefficient sometimes, inconsistent, not always the best decision maker, in spite of the fact that he's in that leadership role. These are the things with CJ McCollum, but he's also been, available, steadfast. He's tried to be a good leader, set a good example, and he has put in work. Like, he does try. And it has been great to have guys like that. And I feel like we're going to see similar things from DeJounte Murray, who I presume is probably going to be stuck with the team for a little while, which hopefully good things can still come of that relationship, because David Griffin did bring in some people who wanted to be here in New Orleans and actually like seemed to enjoy their time here and put in the effort. And it's funny when I heard like Josh Hart being like, oh, well, nobody wants to come to New Orleans. And I know the front office has had a reputation in the past, but Josh Hart, I still feel like he poured out his heart and soul for the city whenever he did play. I mean, all the stuff that you see him doing on the Knicks now, that dude you saw flashes of that same hustle energy, that same fight. He brought that to New Orleans and everywhere he has been. And I guess that just speaks to his professionalism. If he truly didn't love the franchise all that much, they still played that hard. But no, there have been plenty of guys like CJ, like DeJounte Murray, who embrace the franchise. And once again, people can push back against all that culture stuff of being like, well, what good is the culture if you're not winning? Sure, it's nice to have some nice guys we like who represent the city well, but we want to get to that next level because the franchise can only survive so long if you've never gotten there. So believe me, I get that. And so that is why I wonder if it wasn't possible at some point that we could have made a bigger swing had we been a bit more ambitious. Because most seasons, the whole attitude was make a few tweaks and try to run it back with Ingram and Zion and then CJ. And things kept happening to make that not work. And yeah, I mean, the thing to continue to understand here is this is just an extremely misfortune-prone team that, you know, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that no amount of good team management could have avoided some of this, but at the end of the day, I don't know. It's odd. It seems like we've tried to like fix the medical staff issue so many times, and it never seems to make a difference. So of course, people just say New Orleans is cursed. But regardless, these misfortune things happen. It's still undeniable. I think the team's underperformed, and so okay, let's go ahead and let's look at the David Griffin era as a whole, and what do we really get? So first two seasons, kind of a total, nothing really to write about there. First season, was the COVID season, and it's not like that was the only thing that dismantled the season. I mean, not having Zion from the start made things difficult, and starting that season, it seemed like we had a really talented team. I mean, there's a reason I became a fan around that time when I really started to fall in love with the team, because even before Zion came on, Ingram and Lonzo and Drew was still there, and we had even managed to bring in a vet like JJ Redick. There was a good amount of competent, talented players on that team, and it felt like they maybe could have done something. And they didn't win very many games before Zion came back, before Zion made his debut. I think they were pretty darn mediocre for most of that whole time. And then COVID happened. And then when they came back in the bubble, they were just didn't have any mojo. So, we were still filling things out then, just testing ill waters, and things already went bad, but that was nobody's fault there. So then Drew wants out, and there's probably nothing we could have done to keep him. We did what seems like a pretty good trade with the Bucks. The fact that we still have some draft capital from the Bucks is nice, and Drew goes and wins a chip, and that's great. I think that second season is always going to feel a bit like the what if season, even though typically people look at the what if season as the season where the injuries happened, and what if no injuries? But I don't know, that second season of Zion, 2021, is so weird to me because it seems like we really should have had something and we just didn't. And I guess the pieces just really didn't fit. And so maybe you could look at that as the organizational team building low for David Griffin, because I do think in all the seasons following, we had teams that fit together a little better. And you could say if we had the reason I still call it a what if though is because I can't help but wonder if we had a better coach, if we had not Stan Van Gundy, if we had somebody who really could kind of rally the team, could they have figured something out? Because it was so baffling that team was heinous defensively when we had Steven Adams and Lonzo, and I'm trying to think all those, but it feels like we had so many guys who had a reputation as good defenders. I mean, I don't know if you could include Eric Bledsoe in there, but regardless, odd season. Then that following offseason, what I would say is as far as moves go, the highlight of the David Griffin era, I would say this is the feather in his cap. I would give David Griffin credit for this in particular. That move where we trade Steven Adams to the Grizzlies, I think it was on draft night, and we traded down. We had the 10th pick, which ended up being Zaire Williams, who went to the Grizzlies, who Definitely not a great pick by the Grizzlies. I think Zaire, what is he on the Knicks now or something? I don't know. Where is Zaire? The Raptors? I can't even remember. But yeah, didn't quite really work out for Zaire Williams. And in the meantime, us going back in the draft to 17, picking up Trey Murphy at 17. And on top of that, when we traded Steven Adams and went back, Jonas Valanciunas, who was very, very, very solid for us for 3 good seasons. And, still not the ideal center next to Zion, but, there's only like 2 or 3 guys in the league who you could say are like the ideal center next to Zion, and not, I'm sure we continually looked at getting those guys, and yeah. I still sometimes dream of the Miles Turner thing, but yeah, Miles Turner, always in trade rumors, will maybe never be traded. What else is there to say? I don't know. I did like Jonas Valanciunas' time here. I'm always going to have some nostalgia for some of these disappointing seasons, but I should go back, and we were counting through David Griffin each season. So, going into that next season, that was when, for a brief moment, things looked as bleak as this past season. Like, if you want to look at the lowest points in Pelicans seasons recently, it's beginning of the 2021-2022 season and this whole last season. This whole last season was like, what if we never figured it out at the 2021-2022 season? Because that fall, we lost like our first 8 games. We went on like a 13-14 game losing streak. Heinous. And then we still made the playoffs. And Willie Green was there. It was his first season. And that was like, it's crazy to think back to that time when Willie Green seemed like the coach of the future. And in some ways he still did revive the team. And this is where you've got to give David Griffin and Willie Green credit, is they've given more life to the franchise through good drafting, good development. Guys like Herb Jones, which, I think Herb Jones would have been successful no matter where he went because he just has that mentality. But to see that in a guy and be like, hey, this guy, he may not have the most explosive offensive capabilities. He did 4 years in college. He's maybe getting looked over by some other guys, but this guy's just a hard worker. For Willie to see that in him, and it was only like a dozen games into the season when he started, and then he was like a starter for the whole rest of the season, and he's been a starter this whole way through. And then this past season, the one bright spot, Yves Missi, where it's the exact same situation again. Of this rookie comes in, is really good defensively, immediately is in the starting lineup, and it's crazy. Yves Missi led our team this past season in starting. He started 67 games. Far and away. I think the only other guy who's closest, like CJ, started like 51. But Yves Missi with 67 starts. We needed that, to talk about this past season as David Griffin's big failure. This was supposed to be the season where, I don't know, they did temper it a little bit, like, we're still going to try this thing. And we know, we got to just try it one more time. But this was still supposed to be a good season for us. Like bringing in DeJounte Murray, we think we finally have our point guard. And Ingram and Zion should hopefully be healthy going into the season. And CJ's still here. The center thing was concerning. When Missi looked good in that first game, I'm like, okay, maybe we'll be all right. And that did hold true for Missi, who only got better. But everything else fell off the rails immediately. Still felt like such perfect comedy for DeJounte Murray to break his hand in the very first game of the season. But what are we even talking about here? Injuries, like I've been saying, you know what it is. These things are just par for the course for the Pelicans. But even still, this past season, it felt comical to have literally our 7 best players all out with injury at the same time, like in November. Heinous. So where does that leave us now? Well, whoever's stepping in to David Griffin's role now is going to be making some very, very big decisions. And the rumor has it, I believe Shamet Dua, who first posted the word that David Griffin was probably on his way out, I believe the word is that while ownership definitely wants to keep Willie Green, whoever they bring in to replace David Griffin, they're going to leave it up to them whether they want to replace whether they want to replace Willie Green. And like I said, I think if Joe Dumars does fill that role, I think Joe Dumars is probably keeping Willie Green. I would bet on that. But we don't know. Whoever it might be. And a lot of people still definitely calling for Willie to go. And I do get it. And also I get why they want to keep him. But this particular offseason with all look, Mike Malone is the prize. If you can try, whatever strings you can pull, you got to talk to him. You got to try and convince him. Truckload of cash. Miss Benson, I know we're going into a recession, but whatever you got to do to bring in Mike Malone, you got to try. Then Taylor Jenkins is interesting, and it's even interesting I've been going on the Grizzlies subreddit and reading Grizzlies fans talking about why they think Taylor Jenkins was let go, and definitely seems like a lot of the attitude around Taylor Jenkins is within the Grizzlies fan base is more similar to the Pelicans with Willie Green than you might think. Sort of in that he's this guy who's great at developing young talent, but then in serious game scenarios, X's and O's, some rotation lineup things, it's just kind of odd and definitely just doesn't seem to be the strongest foundationally as far as some of the X's and O's stuff goes. And I thought Taylor Jenkins was better than that. And I do think he is better than Willie Green at least, but I think maybe not by much. I think there's a lot of Pelicans fans right now who would in a heartbeat trade Willie Green for Taylor Jenkins. I am a bit more skeptical. And the one nice thing is having Borrego in-house. And to be fair, I'm not necessarily excited at the idea of Borrego being the head coach in the interim or not. But it does maybe make you a bit more comfortable to have James Borrego in-house, because if you start interviewing other coaches, or if you let Willie Green go and you can't bring Willie back and you don't land any of your targets, if you have to go with Borrego even in the interim, okay, it's like Borrego, he was interviewed by Detroit, Cleveland, and LA last offseason, and ultimately they all passed on him. So I don't know how much you say that's 3 good marks for him or 3 marks against him that they didn't pick him. But Borrego, he's supposedly an offensive guru, and that's something we could use, especially because I think the defense is probably going to hold now. Guys like Herb, Misi, there's good defenders on the roster who can help to bolster the defense, and I think there's guys who can bring the defensive energy and make the defense decent, even if you have a coach who is less defensively minded than Willie Green. So I think Borrego trying to cook up something spicier for the offense could be pretty decent. It's just you'd really rather have even Mike Brown maybe. Mike Brown, a more proven offensive guru. You look at what he did with the Kings. If he could do something similar in New Orleans, I don't know. You maybe look at Mike Brown too, especially if, Mike Malone gets offered a job immediately. But yeah, so big decisions to be made with head coach and then draft pick, of course. And I'm not going to lie, I trust David Griffin pretty well with drafting at the very least. I know not everybody feels like he's... Okay, let's run through it, though. Let's run through David Griffin. He drafted Zion. It had to be done. Any GM with the number 1 pick in that draft, would have drafted Zion. We don't have to talk about it. That's not, we can't in any way use that to judge his drafting ability. Jackson Hayes, yeah, not so great there. Nickeil was interesting because Nickeil has become a really solid role player. Wasn't quite that for us, although he did show some great offensive flashes. But I will still give David Griffin some credit for Nickeil because he did become a pretty solid player, and I think he saw some of those same things. And then the next season, once again, like, this is why it took a while for people to be like, wait, David Griffin can actually really draft, because Kyra Lewis also whiffed pretty hard in 2020 with Kyra Lewis. Then the next season, that was the big one. Like, 17, you get Trey Murphy. 35, Herb Jones. Undrafted, you signed Jose Alvarado. And those 3 guys having such a big role, especially in that Suns playoff series. Hugely important for the entire franchise going forward. And then he drafted well after that Dyson Daniels. I mean, I might need to do a whole nother video on the Dyson Daniels thing and whether it was a mistake for us to trade him, evaluate. Like, it's hard to say now. Like, just, it's so unfortunate. DeJounte Murray, the double injuries he had this season, it's really hard to fairly evaluate that trade how I would like to. But yeah, undeniable at this point, Dyson Daniels, great player. It was a great pick. And even if he's no longer with the team, he was used for a significant trade. Then Jordan Hawkins, jury's still out on him. It's been a bit more inconsistent. But there are signs. But then getting Messi this next draft, man, like, yeah, no, this Pelicans team has had a great eye for talent. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit nervous not having David Griffin there for the draft. I mean, if we get like the number 1 overall pick and we just, as any team would, it's once again a Zion situation where you just pick the guy, you pick Cooper Flag, and that's it. But, we've only got I think a 12-14% chance at the number 1 pick, and highest odds we get number 6. So might need to be another really lucky stab there. And there's going to be plenty of talent at 6, don't get me wrong, but not as much of a sure thing as if you could go for Ace or Harper or, of course, Flag. So, yeah, off the bat, some very big questions. I think this video is getting a little too long, so maybe save some of this for follow-up because I do want to talk about the Zion situation. Definitely the chances that a Zion trade could happen, I think, have increased just because I felt like it was not very likely at all that you would see David Griffin do that. But now, who knows who might come in and what their ideas are. And I'm going to do some more research on Joe Dumars too. Definitely some stuff to watch here. But hey, at the very least, this horrible, awful, no good season is over, and we can look ahead to hopefully build something fresh. So take care, y'all. Thanks for watching the video. And I do want to put out, as soon as I can, before tomorrow night in the play-in games start, I want to do a play-in preview video because I think we are in for some very exciting play-in games this year. All right. Well, thanks.